37. Kate is a murderer. Jane enunciated through gnashed teeth. It doesn't matter who I am, because you are no better than me. What basis did Daddy have to give you the best of everything? Why? How is that fair? That's simple, because I'm his real daughter. Kate replied matter-of-factly. It highlighted how unreasonable Jane was acting. That is why I hate you. Jane's eyes were burning with rancor. They flashed crazily as she said, "No worries. I have a plan ready to destroy you. Can you tell what it is?" Compared to her, Kate was as graceful as ever. "I do not, but do tell." Jane suddenly moved in for an embrace. However, in mid-movement, she stopped, hugged her stomach, and wailed grievously, "Sis, please don't get mad at me. It's all my fault, sis. Please forgive me." Before Jane would finish her sentence, she screamed and collapsed to the floor as if kicked by a violent force. She held on to her stomach with a tortured expression and howled in a fit of panic. "My stomach! Someone please help me! My stomach! It's paining very badly." Thanks to her, a lot of guests were looking their way. Based on the show and tell, they thought Kate had shoved Jane to the floor, and they were shell-shocked. Jane's high-pitched wailings gathered more attention, and eventually the whole ballroom was watching the skit go down. Of course, they didn't know it was a skit. They stared wide-eyed with horror at what they thought Kate had done. After all, Jane's acting was way too convincing. Jane's wailing also attracted her husband's attention. As if hearing his cue, Nolan bolted over in a flash. He knelt down beside his wife and asked worriedly, "Jane, what happened to you? Who did this?" Who did this? There was no one else standing near her besides Kate. Jane snuck a glance at Kate before clutching her husband's arm, speaking in a hurried, flustered manner. "Honey, I'm sure sis didn't mean it. We can worry about that later. I'm more concerned about our child." Child? Everyone in the hearing range was spooked. If Kate had hurt Jane's baby fetus in any way, she could be arrested for child destruction. After all, it had the potential to be a life. Kate could be jailed if convicted. Nolan's expression changed unexpectedly. He glared at Kate viciously, his voice dripping with malice as he said, "You pushed my wife because you want to kill my child?" "Honey, I told you sis didn't mean it. It was an accident." Jane begged her husband on Kate's behalf. "Jane, you don't need to defend her. She has been bullying you ever since you're a kid, and now because she knew you're pregnant, she made you miscarry, because she can't bear to see you have something good in your life. Such an evil bitch. Someone call the police. I demand justice be swift on this heartless woman." Nolan cursed. "Honey," Jane tried to plead some more, but it was interrupted by Nolan. "Darling, I love that you're a benevolent woman who believes in people's kindness, but she has attempted on our child's life. Isn't that enough to tell you about her true nature?" Jane went silent immediately and looked away with disappointment. It was as if she suddenly saw the ugly truth about Kate and was incapable of defending her anymore. Her performance drew everyone in, and they couldn't help but empathize with her. Thus, the earlier admiration they had for Kate turned into angry indignation. Even though they weren't privy to the whole truth, they could fill in the blanks with their own imaginations. In their minds, Kate had to be a less than stellar woman. If not, why would her marriage to Ian only last for 3 years? Ian is such a perfect, saintly man. If even he couldn't stand her, it goes to show how horrible his ex-wife must be. Now that they saw that she hurt her sister with their own eyes, and still dared to hold herself in such high regard, it was hard for them to believe she was a good person. None of them knew, while Kate was being supercilious, it was specifically aimed at the couple's acting. She felt embarrassed on Jane and Nolan's behalf for their crappy acting chops. She refused to entertain the duo's laughable performance. But in people's eyes, her lack of response and emotion was misconstrued as egotism. People have issues against women that think too highly of themselves. Kate's condition was only made worse by the fact that she was a divorced woman. The Chinese cultural ideals of a woman being loyal and subservient worked to undermine Kate's innocence. Furthermore, Kate didn't care to explain herself. She just allowed the crowd to go rampant with their speculation, even though the conclusion they reached wasn't favorable for her. Of course, Jane and Nolan wouldn't have given her a chance to clear her name anyway. They were determined to ruin Kate with one move, to send her to lowest dredge of life. This was because the day Kate regained her foothold would be the day Jane's life ended. The reason Nolan married Jane was he had his eyes set on Davis family's enormous inheritance. Therefore, Nolan couldn't allow her to challenge the distribution of the inheritance. Actually, Nolan didn't consider Kate a threat, even though she might have recovered her memory, though he was cautious of Ian. Kate was Ian's ex-wife, and they had a son together. From Jane and Nolan's perspective, Ian must have given his ex-wife a helping hand, or else how would a woman like Kate make a comeback so suddenly and so soon? The both of them feared Kate and Ian reigniting their love for each other, and should the day come when the two of them remarried, it would truly be the end for Jane and Nolan. They wouldn't be able to handle an opponent as powerful as Ian. Therefore, they had to take out Kate before she was able to bolster her new lease on life, before she could wiggle her way back into Ian's affection and life, or else it would be too late. Both Nolan and Jane were brutal people. They would not hesitate to kick their enemies while they were down, especially if it were the two that sent them down there in the first place. Enemies, it's easier to take them out when they're young. It was why the pair was so determined to frame Kate. Nolan was so open with his hatred towards Kate that no one dared to speak up. They didn't want to cross Nolan. Other than the occasional contained chatters, the room was still watching the scene unfold. Kate was left to her own devices. However, her expression remained unchanged. There was no sign of fear or anxiety. She was as motionless as a statue. Even though Jane was miscarrying before her, she was still unaffected. What a cold-blooded bitch. Jane, don't worry. I will not let her get away with it if anything happens to you. There will be hell for those that dare to hurt you. Nolan exclaimed as he pulled Jane into a deep hug, portraying the role of a loving husband to the best of his ability. The crowd was further roused by this open display of love. Their mounting anger was directed straightly at Kate. Finally, someone in the crowd piped up. "So I heard they're sisters. How nasty you must be to harm your own sister like that. She must be incredibly envious of Jane. I know life hasn't been kind to Kate for the past few years. She must have gotten mentally imbalanced knowing her little sister has married a good man, for her to be able to do something as immoral as this." Episode 38. The video won't lie. I knew she came with hidden motives when she showed up in that slutty dress today. I just couldn't predict she would be so vicious. You're so right. The woman probably thinks she still has a chance to marry into the Miller family. Sadly, CEO Miller already has a fiancé, and it's the gorgeous Ms. Sloan. Exactly. Ms. Sloan is so much better and gentler than her. Jenny stood in the middle of the crowd. Her heart burst out in victorious joy. She fixed Kate a death stare, her inner self doing a celebratory split. The bitch, where has your previous arrogance gone? Nolan has connections both over and under the table. In other words, he wasn't a simple character. She should consider herself lucky if she survives this ordeal with half her life still intact. Regardless, her reputation will be completely ruined. It will be impossible to bounce back from this, much less the chance of remarrying into the Miller family. So, Kate, accept your destiny that you'll always be a third-class citizen, and that I will always be better than you. Jenny was incredibly pleased. She only got more excited when she saw the police arrive. That day was Miller family's young master's birthday party, so other than the usual security, the police were also there to provide extra protection. When Nolan called for the police, the few officers stationed nearby immediately rushed over. They took less than a minute to reach the ballroom. What happened? Who asked for the police? The first officer who arrived issued with authority. Honey, my stomach! Jane wailed weakly. Nolan leveled a threatening gaze at Kate, saying, "It was me who called the police. This woman here intends to harm my wife and the baby she's carrying. I demand you have her cuffed this moment, and I want a satisfactory resolution from the police." The policeman looked at Kate and asked severely, "Miss, is what Mr. Green's saying true?" Kate looked at them listlessly, her voice as cold as frost. If his wife is truly in pain, he should have called for emergency rescue and not the police. My men have of course called for an ambulance. Kate, you better pray that my wife is uninjured, or I will have your head. Nolan warned grimly. The wrath in his eyes was strong enough to give the police pause. Kate's expression didn't even twitch. It was as if she didn't give a flying fuck about Nolan's warning. Nolan, if this was entirely just a show put on by your wife to frame me, how do you intend to compensate me? Jane said with quivering lips, "Sis, but I didn't." You bitch. How dare you accuse my wife? Nolan was at the height of his rage. He ordered the policeman sternly, "What are you people doing just standing there? Arrest her this moment. If you have any suspicion about what really went down, we can check the security tapes. The video won't lie." However, the footage would only have video but no sound. According to footage, it would look as if Kate had given Jane a hard shove when the latter came in for a hug. Kate found herself in an indefensible position. Afraid of being clocked by Nolan, who could make or break their career, the police officers ordered Kate, "Miss, please follow us obediently to the precinct, or we will have to do this the hard way." And what kind of way would that be? Kate gave an icy retort. She was openly challenging the police's authority. The leading officer gave his signal and ordered, "Detain the woman." "Halt," said a gruff voice when the two officers moved onto Kate. The physically impressive Ian moved over steadily, his expression serious. Spotting him, the police froze. The leading officer inquired politely, "Mr. Miller, how can we help you?" Ian gave Kate a quick once-over. He saw only ease in her eyes. He said, "I heard Kate said it was the two who framed her. Shouldn't we give her a chance to explain herself?" "I didn't frame sis," Jane objected agitatedly before patting her husband's arm lightly. "Honey, should we just let it go? I'm sure Big Sis didn't mean to do it on purpose. After all, we are family. Let's not put her in such a rough spot." "No way," Nolan answered vehemently. "She physically assaulted you. I can't just let it be. CEO Miller, it won't do even if you intercede on her behalf. You have to understand that the woman intentionally harmed my wife and child." Such an Oscar-worthy performance. Kate commented with a slow clap. The whole good cop, bad cop act, while individually not so great, was paired to perfection. A perfect pair of bad apples. They were truly meant for each other. "Kate, what did you say?" Nolan glared at her. "You still dare to mock us at a time like this?" Kate didn't have the stomach to watch them continue the acting anymore. She had what she needed. "I complimented you two on your acting, and you consider that mocking? I guess the truth really does hurt." "Sis, but I'm really not. How could you accuse me of something I'm not doing? I'm so disappointed in you," Jane said helplessly, earning sympathy points. Kate could feel the crowd's wrath charging at her like a wave. Jane had tried her best to forgive Kate of her sin and ease her out of the sticky situation, but not only didn't Kate appreciate her, but she went after poor little Jane. The woman is a stone-cold bitch. I accused you? Kate leveled Jane a steely gaze. Jane, there is karma in this world. You know perfectly well what truly happened. I advise you to come out with the truth before things take a turn for the worse. Sis, you... Tears of frustration flowed out of Jane's eyes. Like a woman devoid of hope, she told Nolan softly, Honey, you're right. I shouldn't have condoned her actions in the past. It's all my fault. Darling, don't worry. It's still not too late, and it's definitely not your fault. Nolan turned and ordered the police officers with an underlying warning. Do you get paid to stand there like stones? We'll know the truth after we get her to the station. Miss Davis, please follow us immediately. The officers took the hint and said harshly. Kate stood still, her mouth open to say, If you want me to follow, fine, but first answer me 2 questions. What else do you want to say? The police were getting impatient, but the law did state that Kate was innocent until proven guilty, so they gave her the chance to speak her mind. Furthermore, the room was curious about what she wanted to say. Ian stood at the side watching her. For some reason, he felt in his heart Kate could settle this herself. However, it didn't stop him from wondering, how will she prove her innocence? Kate asked with a tone as if this was all but another normal day. My first question is how serious the criminal charge will be if I'm convicted of intentionally hurting Jane. Yours is a crime of willful and malicious injury, so 1 week to 3 years of incarceration depending on the ruling. The leading officer answered with a condescending harumph. In other words, no matter what, Kate would be jailed. Once she stepped into the jailhouse, the conviction would follow her for the rest of her life. Of course, Kate wasn't naive enough to think she would get the 1 week ruling. Nolan and Jane would try their best to get her locked up for 3 years.